Welcome back from our recess on the April 19, 2023 policy session with the Board of County Commissioners. Gary Schmidt, Administrator, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. A reminder, everyone, Commissioner Schrader is out of the office today. The first policy session this afternoon is full cost recovery environmental health fee proposal utilizing ARPA funds. We have staff from Health, Housing, Human Services, Public Health Division to present, and they are Denise Swanson, the Deputy Director, and Kim, right? You're the Deputy Public Health Director. Well, please introduce yourselves, both of you.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Smith and Commissioners. Denise Swanson, Deputy Director, Health, Housing, and Human Services, and my colleague.
Hi, I'm Kim LaCroix. I'm the Deputy Public Health Director.
So we're here today to follow up on
I'm sorry. Forgive me, Chair. Would you please convene as the Public Health Board? I've missed it again. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I will recess as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as the Public Health Board. I missed it too. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Go ahead, Denise.
Thank you, Gary. So last week, the Board of Commissioners, acting as the Board of Public Health, directed staff to come back with the math for a 3-year schedule for a fee increase for our environmental fees, which takes care of our inspections, as you'll recall we discussed last week, that will bring our program into full cost recovery and offset increases to businesses with ARPA funds. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim to go ahead and just run through what we're doing, what the memo is, and explain that and take any questions.
Sounds good. Thanks, Denise. In the spirit of building a thriving and prosperous Clackamas County business environment, we are here before you today with a sustainable and fiscally responsible proposal to achieve full cost recovery within 3 years. Our proposal includes a fee increase credit utilizing ARPA funds to keep fees flat for 3 years, and it also factors in inflationary increases for when ARPA funds are no longer available beginning in calendar year 2027. Specifically, we are requesting you to consider allocating $863,000 in ARPA funding to be utilized as a fee credit over 3 years when ARPA funding requests are considered at a later date, a 10% fee increase each year for 3 years beginning in fiscal year 24, and an annual increase thereafter of 2.5%, a standard inflation rate if needed. We recognize that with this proposal, food, pool, and lodging facilities will experience a fee increase starting in fiscal year 26-27. Keeping the interests of local businesses as a priority, Public Health plans to be very proactive and develop a robust communications plan with clear messaging about the future fee increase. This includes providing information in the regular newsletter, through email and website updates, and during in-person inspections. We plan to list the fee increase credit on the yearly invoices and give recognition to the BCC's proposed support to businesses as they continue to recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on their operations. We are seeing promising signs of industry recovery because we are at an all-time high for the number of restaurants and mobile food carts operating in Clackamas County. In December 2019, before the pandemic, we had 919 restaurants in Clackamas County. As of March 3rd, 2023, we had 953 restaurants. During the same period, the number of mobile food carts increased from 134 to 189, a 41% increase. This increase in the number of restaurants and food carts is wonderful for the local economy, but it also results in more inspections, education, and requires a higher level of technical assistance from our environmental health staff. Thank you for considering our proposal so that we can continue to contribute to a vibrant Clackamas economy, meet our contractual obligations and statutory requirements, and fulfill our public health duty to keep our residents safe from food and waterborne illnesses. Thank you. So we're available for questions. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioners, any questions or concerns?
Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Socks.
I apologize, and maybe we can work on it in the future. I almost really recommend we kind of defer this for a discussion, but my intent was, I'll say, my intent was to over a 3-year period was to gradually increase the fees, and any shortages would be backfilled by the ARPA dollars. Not keep the rate flat and fill the void with ARPA dollars, which I think is what is proposed. So if I had all the numbers to know what your shortages were and whatnot, I could almost put together the numbers. I'm sure you could as well, but my intent may have been miscommunicated, so I take responsibility for that. Gary, could you help with that?
Yes, and I apologize as well, Commissioners. I was confused at the end of the last week's session on exactly what the direction was to staff. And staff did their very, very best to come back to you with what we thought you wanted to hear, Commissioners, and I thank you, H3S Public Health. You did fantastic work, and basically 2 hours last week to pull this all together. I guess, and also I'm concerned that you're binding future boards to a decision today, and so perhaps if you consider going back to what you considered last week, just say you're not going to raise fees next year. Direct me to find another option, which I'll come back to you with ARPA. It'd be $217,000 for 1 year. That gives us more time to really come to review individually, Commissioners, if you wish, or to talk with you about what the staff is proposing.
Now, my only concern, Gary, maybe there's a hybrid here or something we can do in between. I don't want to have a big shock to the businesses between what it is today to where it will end up. So that's why I wanted to gradually increase that. And then any shortages from a gradual increase would be backfilled up to 2026 with ARPA dollars. That was my intent. So I want to avoid the shock. My concern about leaving it flat right now is that just kicks that raise down the road, or the can, if you will. That's my only concern. So we don't have to. I'm willing to do whatever we need to do now. But I just wonder if we can stall that discussion out till we get better clarity. Maybe not. Just wanted to put that out there. But I just don't want it to end up in another delay where that shock, that impact of the businesses is even higher.
Thank you, Paul, for that. My comments on page 8, use of ARPA funds. First year is $116,000. Next year is almost $350,000, and then this third year is $400,000. That's a total of $863,000 of ARPA funds, which is almost $1 million. I don't like that either. And I don't know how we can stretch out the use of ARPA funds for 3 years. This board has not seen a list and/or approved the remaining ARPA dollars. I do not consider that ARPA dollars is a priority for this particular type of spending. In the past, we've been very picky on ARPA is sticks and bricks, not necessarily program development, which I consider this program development. Our businesses, I hope, have received ARPA dollars, but I suspect that many of them have not. So I don't like fee increases, especially to this particular group. They have been hit, I believe, inordinately hard. I used to be in the industry for 14 years. I ran a facility. I always paid my fees, but I tell you, it's when the fees go out before the rest of your income is realized, it's tough. We're entering, I think, some problematic economic times with the recession, a possible recession, rising interest rates, and a credit crunch, and just can't go with that. So I don't know what this commission wants to do, but I don't support it. Yeah, Commissioner Scholl?
Looking at your chart on page 4, a small restaurant up to 15 seats paying a fee of $690 a year goes to $1,000 in 6 years, right? That 10% next year, the following year, and the third year seems a bit difficult. My question is this. Before you look at raising fees, I think I asked this question a couple of weeks ago, have you looked at every possible method for reducing the cost of administration of this program? Okay. I remember what your answer was, and I'm just asking it again, just to make sure that we're being as efficient as we can before we go to our businesses to increase fees.
So Commissioner Schull, we have not raised fees since 2019. And with inflation and the number of businesses that's going up, we're just in a position where in order to meet our contractual obligations, this keeps us whole. And frankly, we would be within our, in the statute tells us to have fees in order to make the program full cost recovery. So one thing we could consider would be going back to the original proposal, which would be a much smaller incremental increase of 5% per year, which would be approximately $38 a year for a restaurant. I think 16 to 50
That's correct, yep.
people.
And if we could use ARPA dollars, I think, the first year to mitigate. It might not seem like a lot of money, but it's going to be seen as an effort to try to be sensitive to those businesses out there that, I'm telling you what, the people are working like their tails off out there to make a profit these days. Even though you go to a restaurant, like Commissioner Smith said last week, she bought a pizza worth $70.
3.
You know, 3 of them, yeah. Well, but things are expensive, but still profits are still very paper thin. So I asked a question just to alleviate my own concern and the concern of people out there listening. So maybe we can come up with ARPA for the first year and then the 5% after that. Just a thought.
I have a question. Are these yearly inspections? These are a yearly inspection that twice a year
2 times a year.
they go out?
Yes. Yep.
If
That's
there's-
in restaurants?
Yeah, this is for restaurants, pools, and lodging facilities.
And childcare.
Childcare.
So your
correct,
lodging facilities are 2 times a year. It used to be 1 time a year.
yep. I would have to defer to Julie to answer that, yep.
So why did it go from one time to 2 times? Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, Chair Smith. I'm Julie Hamilton. I'm the Program Manager for Environmental Health, and I'd be happy to answer that question for you. So the Oregon Health Authority has set the frequency of inspections, and you're correct. For restaurants and food facilities, it is twice a year for routine inspections. For lodging facilities like hotels and bed and breakfasts, it's 1 time a year. For our campgrounds and RV parks and the organizational camps that are open all year, we go twice. So it just depends on what type of facility, but that is given to us to perform at the frequency our state agency that oversees the program sets. Is that
And the
answer?
coffee shops, your drive-throughs, those are twice a year?
Those
They're
are twice
treated
a
like
year.
restaurants?
Yep, and we are required to do those. So.
Okay. So the fee for a drive-through, how do you determine that fee when they don't have seats in the restaurants? You say 15 seats or, what, $800?
Yes, so for facilities that are takeout only and don't provide on-site seating, we consider those 0 seats, and so they would fall in that 0 to 15 licensing category, and that's what the state has advised us to do. And we only look at indoor seating and not outdoor seating. So if they provide outside seating, we only look at how many chairs they have indoors.
So that's kind of unfair if you have no seats. You're being charged for the restaurant that has 15 seats. Is that a mandate or is that a recommendation?
No, that's part of the licensing structure that's set in Oregon state statute. They provide that guidance as far as the 0 to 15, 16 to 50, 51 to, I think it's 100, and so on. So we don't have the ability to adjust that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Savis, you're up.
That darn state.
I know, right?
So
You
I-
learn something new every day.
So a couple things. So first question is, I didn't think about this when I turned my light on. Does the state receive any of our revenues? They get any fees? And if so,
Come on up. You're not done yet.
so my question is there a scale to it or some rhyme or reason?
So I will say to that question, Commissioner Savas, yes, the state Oregon Health Authority, as part of the intergovernmental agreement, we set and collect the fees, and then they charge a remittance fee to our county, to all the counties in the state, for a portion of that fee. And it's set in each biennium to cover the costs of their operations. And then for pools, it's a flat fee. So that number gets determined in the intergovernmental agreement that they send out every 2 years.
So they get to make policy, dictate, and collect. That's a pretty good deal. I'm being facetious. No. No, because of course not. Gary, another alternate proposal. I'm not sure where my colleagues are. At least last week I thought, maybe they're still there. There was support to use ARPA dollars to relieve some of the impacts to the businesses, but in the mindset of trying to, whatever the rate increase is, whether it's 1% or 15%, that there would be a shortage, right? And the shortage could be backfilled by the ARPA to give businesses relief and yet still gradually increase the rate. That's the principle in which I'd like to go about it. But I guess I need a better understanding, because I asked a question about my staff, Everett, this morning. I said, well, so I saw on the chart, it was at the chart last week, it was $29,000 was our shortfall. I said, no, actually, going forward, it's like 200,000, close to, anticipated shortfall financially?
294, yeah.
294. Okay, so, and then knowing the complexity and the varying different rates, I imagine if you apply a percentage, what gets you to 290? What gets you to 294 for break even?
So it's the.
You have to come to the microphone, please.
Please introduce yourself.
Great question, thank you. I am Sherry Olson. I'm the Finance and Business Services Manager for Public Health. So what brings us to the cost is we have the cost of providing the service. So it's my overall cost for the staff, the product and pieces that we have to get out there, the mileage, all the different components to do this body of work. So I have those costs that are increased annually on an inflation rate. We had a substantial increase from this last fiscal year to next fiscal year simply because of the pay equity component, my allocated costs, and just the cost of doing business in general, products and services as well, increasing. So the cost to staff, the current staffing that I have to do the workload with the amount of facilities we have that's my baseline, that's my cost. So I have a cost. I go then to my fees and increase incrementally those fees by 5, 10, whatever I can do that automatically. And then that lets me know when will I start to come out to break even.
Okay.
Yeah.
So roughly, what's your minimum to break even?
The minimum total dollar that I will need?
Well, percentage increase to break even for this coming fiscal year for budgeting purposes.
This next fiscal year, if, so I actually have the numbers back there. I'd have to take a quick look just to give you the actual
You
number.
could have somebody bring them up, or you could get them.
Yeah.
We'll take time, you don't have to hurry.
I want to make you all whole and get you where you need to go.
Absolutely. All right, let me pull it up.
That's
Brought my little
fine.
automated document here.
Anybody wants to add anything while she's pulling that up, feel free.
All right, so let's see. In the first year, you're talking 23, 24, this next fiscal year, right? Okay. See if I can-
Kim and Julie, if you'd like to sit over there, you're welcome to. Instead of standing.
I would have to, in the first fiscal year, to break even, I'd have to do a 20% increase.
Okay. And for the restaurants, that brings the rate from 700 something to what?
Yeah, I'll take a look at that really quick here. And we were looking at the 16 to 50,
Yeah, that's the example we're using.
the example we're
Yeah,
using?
Yes.
Yeah, so 765 to 918.
765 to 918. Well, that's quite a bit.
2918, so that's about $150.
Almost $200.
$150.
$150?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we were to move $100 per year to the businesses, that would get us to the $1,000 figure in year 3, 4, right?
Yeah.
Right. So at a $100 increase this year, there would be a shortfall, and that shortfall could be filled by ARPA, right? So we pass on the $100 increase this year. You have a shortfall that can be backfilled by ARPA. So there's a little bit of both. And then next year, another $100, and then there's a backfill needed. You got ARPA available. That's what I'm thinking. That was my intention last week, so I'm sorry if I miscommunicated it. And if there's still support from my colleagues to do that, then I would just affirm that or make another motion.
I'm not sure what the motion's going to be, Gary. I think we need to go back to the drawing board on this.
So-
And when do you want to bring it back is the second question.
Well, I think I have a motion that'll get there, so I'll make a
Gary?
Unfortunately, I'm behind. This is part of the proposed budget I needed to finalize 2 days ago, so I need to have some funding stream in the budget you're going to receive in 2 weeks. So I'm hearing clearly you're not going to ask the restaurants to pay more, so we all get that. But the question is, you can either just direct me to figure it out, you can give guidance, it could be ARPA, it could be general fund. I just need to find some funding source this week.
Why can't we take it up during our main budget deliberations when the entire 10-member committee?
You could. I like to make it part of the budget so it's already there. Otherwise, this will bog us down in the budget committee.
Okay, what I'll do to expedite this, I'll make a motion, and then if the budget committee wants to tweak it, we can tweak it, but at least you have something to get your budget going. So I'll make the motion. I'll make the motion that we raise the rate to the businesses and pass on per year a $100 increase on the rate. And then backfill the shortfall, which I'm going to guess is about $50,000 roughly, with ARPA dollars.
Okay.
That's my motion.
I'll second.
Where do we get the 50,000 from?
ARPA.
But, no, that I understand. Is 50,000 backfill accurate?
Well, I would get the exact number for you. I could get that to you today.
Right,
Yeah,
right. But that conveys the principle.
Right,
It's some
'cause-
rough math to get there.
correct. What we were doing before was having you do the crediting the business to keep it flat as well as the deficit. So that's why,
I just don't want to give them that shock of going from 700 to 1,000. I don't care what year it happens, but I don't want to give them the shock.
Okay, Paul, so you're saying for year one to do that? 50,000 would be almost the max, let's say it's 60, I mean, okay,
100,000 the businesses pay additional this year, or this coming fiscal year,
but they're not.
okay? That leaves a $50,000 shortfall
yes,
that will need to be filled to make them whole, which will be filled with the ARPA dollars,
for this year.
if I understood Sherry correctly.
Yes, so if we did 15% the first year versus the 20, which takes it down, we're getting close. We had $64,000 shortfall in the first year at 15%.
Okay, that 64 would be filled with ARPA,
I second
Right,
that.
not 50, but 64.
64,
64,
whatever,
correct.
yeah, whatever the numbers are.
Is the motion clear?
No. So may I restate it? You're requesting a 15% increase in environmental health fees, of which the increase will be paid by ARPA dollars, not passing it to the,
No.
okay.
No.
All right, please restate it
So
then.
the 15%, Sherry, is 15% the right number? 15?
15% would give us the $64,000 deficit. That actually brings the dollar amount for that particular fee to $880 next year.
Okay.
And we're at $765 now.
Okay, so that would be the realized rate
Yes,
the business would realize?
yep,
Okay, so 880?
$880.
Okay.
Do you want me to lower it more, or, because that's a little over your $100 mark, but not much. It's about 115,
115?
yeah.
So is this everybody, is this all the groups represented on your spreadsheet?
All the different, yes, all the different facilities that they inspect, correct. So that rate would go across the board.
So I'll just keep it simple, make 15%, stay with the 15%. So I move that we support a 15% increase passed on to the businesses, and any shortfall be backfilled with ARPA dollars.
You can throw stuff at me.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion again.
I have a question.
Yes,
Motion on the table.
okay, we have a motion, it's been seconded. Commissioner Scholl.
Starting with the next fiscal year, how many years are we talking about now? Just,
Well, I believe three, roughly.
this motion affects 3 years.
Well, no, this motion only affects 1 year. Well, I don't know, does 15% get us to where we need to go in 3 years?
No, we're going to need to continue to increase. So let me give you a number. Okay, hold on. If we do a 5% increase the next year to 20%, we will have a $30,000 deficit, almost $31,000, excuse me, deficit in fiscal year 24, 25. Do you want me to do another 5 on the third year that we were pronounced, just so you could see it, so it's actually kind of hits hard first and then declines? Okay. Let's see. All right, we will break even with a 5% increase on the third year and will not need any more ARPA funding.
Okay.
Do you want me to amend the motion?
Wait a minute. I don't know what the motion is, and I don't know what we're amending, so we're going to repeat it, and then I'm going to make a suggestion.
Right.
Okay, Paul, why don't we just say a blanket 100,000 of ARPA, and then we adjust the fees accordingly? Because even going from 765 to what, 880? That's over $100 of the 64,000, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm gonna make a stab, because I think I understand. I think we're communicating mathematically, so I'm getting it. So I propose that, I move that we raise the rate for this fiscal year, this coming fiscal year, at 15%, and then in the 2 subsequent years, 5% each.
Backfilled by ARPA dollars till
And
2026.
any shortfalls be backfilled by ARPA dollars. That's my motion.
I will second that.
So how much is the backfill of ARPA dollars?
According to this right now, I have 94,009, so 95,000.
For all 3 years?
Correct, because we're whole in that third year if we're collecting that 5%.
Okay.
So you're going to have a 15% increase next year, then a 5%, then a 5, and then we're going to whatever the inflation rate is thereafter.
That's pretty close to your 100,000.
It is.
It's right there.
Yeah, it is really close. And if you need to spend the 100,000, it's like 5,000. Okay. Commissioners, do we understand the motion? Gary, can you repeat it?
I'm not, but Shannon will.
The motion is to raise for fiscal year 23-24, the rates by 15%, and then 5% in years 2 and 3, with the backfill being ARPA funds, and after that, it will be the rate of inflation increasing the funds.
Is your microphone on, Shannon?
My microphone is not on. Would you like me to read that again?
Yes, would you please? I'm sorry.
Excellent. In fiscal year '24, raising the rate by 15%. In fiscal years '25 and '26, which would be years 2 and 3 of this proposal, it would raise by 5%. And after that, it would raise at the rate of inflation. The backfill between those amounts and the current deficit would be filled with ARPA for years 1 and 2.
I want an amount on the motion. I want an amount certain on ARPA, not to exceed $100,000. I would like it amended. Is
Yeah,
that okay?
I'll amend my motion to max the ARPA contribution at $100,000.
Okay.
Second?
I still second it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Scholl, how are you?
No, it's going to be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
Good work.
Okay. Shannon, can we take the poll?
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Abstain, the motion passes 3-1-0. I abstain because I cannot increase fees, period. Thank you very much, Commissioners, very good work. Gary, what's next?
So we're going to take this from the carryover they already have in public health. You don't have to spend a penny more of your ARPA dollars. If you read your staff report, they have $178,000 sitting there, so they can use that money.
What did you say?
What?
If you read the staff report, you have $178,000 of ARPA funds you have not spent. Is that correct?
Correct.
Oh.
So we're just going to let him keep it.
Why didn't we know that before the motion?
I thought you all read the staff report. Okay,
Beg your pardon on that.
thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
No,
Problem
it's like the winning lottery ticket, right? Thank you very much for all your work. It is appreciated. All you. Okay.
6 more hours to go, commissioners. I'm kidding. All right, let's, Chair, would you please reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners?
I will recess as the Health Board and reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners.
Next policy session. Refer advisory question to voters regarding the repeal or reform of Measure 110 to the November ballot. Jeffrey Munns and Sean Lilligren, Assistant County Counsels, will present. Go ahead.
Commissioners, I think this is a very important discussion, knowing one of our members is still not here. I would like to have a discussion. We don't necessarily have to have a decision point today on it, but I think it's important to have a discussion where the public can see and can weigh in on our conversation and possibly send emails or communicate to us what they're thinking regarding this. So with that in mind, gentlemen, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we prepared this policy session worksheet for you just to kind of open this conversation. As the Chair just stated, we put 3 questions in there just to kind of bracket the issue, where, just to gauge where you would like to go with this issue, to determine what the advisory questions would be, what would be of, most assistance to you in that. What we're looking at as an overall timeline is that we have to be completed with this process by August 18th to have it on the ballot. And Sean can talk about the general kind of format for what that needs to be.
Good afternoon. Essentially, it's a form we need to fill out. It's pretty straightforward legally. There's a word maximum for each part. The question that we're talking about today, 20 words. That's the max, so it can't be long-winded. That's the law. So we did invite Mary Rumbaugh, Director, Behavioral Health in H3S. John Wentworth, our DA, was invited as well, who's also here. We're here for your questions and answers. We look forward to this discussion.
I'd like to welcome District Attorney John Wentworth. Thank you for coming and supporting the board in our efforts. District Attorney Wentworth has also submitted by email some mathematical calculations showing us the failure of this program. And Mr. Wentworth, if you don't mind, I'll just read one of the paragraphs. As of February 28, 2023, Oregon police officers have issued 4,164 citations. Only 34 substance abuse assessments have been conducted. There is no evidence anyone has entered, let alone completed treatment. So far, $265 million of the allocated $330 million has been spent, with very little to show for it. So the issue becomes, it's not the money. Some people think, oh, well, just up the fees, up the money. No, it's the fact that these drugs are very harmful. These taken drugs that have been known to humankind as criminalized drugs, decriminalize them, and Oregon has become a laughingstock in America today as the place to go if you want to do drugs and not be accountable and then have social services pay for your bad habits. Here in Clackamas County, we can no longer do that. We need to recognize, in order to take care of the social problems that the society demands upon us, do something about homelessness, do something about crime, do something about this. We need to go to at least a partial causation component, and that is the decriminalization of drugs, that Measure 110 has been allowed. It was voted on by the residents, the voters of the citizens of Oregon, and I do think they were sold a bill of goods, thinking the program would do exactly the opposite that it does, that it would help. And we have found out it has not helped. In fact, the passage of 110 has exacerbated an addiction problem in this state that I'm not sure that we're going to recover from. With that in mind, Commissioners, we need to consider that language in our opening question. We have Commissioners in the queue. Commissioner Savas, you're up first.
Yeah, as I was telling Sheriff Smith earlier this afternoon, what Nevada is to gambling, Oregon is to drugs, it seems, right? New Jersey was another state, but Nevada's pretty well known for its gambling, and the proliferation of that. I mean, not, you know, and it's not illegal, but we somewhat made a lot of the drugs somewhat basically, or a certain amount of drugs legal. And so it's been a proliferation of activity, and even worse, since that time where the voters passed Measure 110, fentanyl has taken root and been, you know, or realized as being so toxic and putting public health, people's lives in jeopardy, people dying on the street. It just seems that the state should do something to repeal it. And my only heartburn with this is that this is advisory. We have no impact other than a political impact. We're making a political statement, or the voters have an opportunity to weigh in on a political statement of sorts. And maybe that'd be an encouragement for the state to do something next year in the short session. But by the time this is on the ballot, there's no real effect. And I'm sure there's a cost to run an election, right? Do we have an
Yeah.
estimate for that cost?
Well, the cost of an election as a whole is about $300,000, $1 to $1.30 per voter. But it's shared amongst the different measures that are on the ballot, different elections and so on. So depending on when you put it on the ballot, it's going to be a smaller amount. So the answer I got from our elections supervisor was that. It just depends. This certainly wouldn't be the only thing on the ballot. So I think it would be a rather low cost, I think, in comparison to that.
Yeah, but I certainly want to make sure that whatever language we do put in there, not in the statement, but in the measure, that is very clear, this is advisory and has no effect.
Of course, it would have to be required.
Right.
That's part of it, what we would be putting in the material so that in the voters' pamphlet, it would say that explicitly.
Yeah. I'm somewhat reluctant to essentially throw away that amount of public money to put a ballot on there that has no impact. But at the same token, I also think it's important to message out there. But there again, if the message has no net effect, then I even have more concern about the $300,000 of tax.
But Paul, it's
taxpayer
not
dollars.
$300,000.
Whatever it is, whatever the amount is. No one's here to say what that's going to be, but that's essentially laying out my fiscal compass, if you will, on how we spend our dollars and how we, and as I say shared before, whether I shared this in public or not, doesn't really matter, I'll share it now, is that ideally I would hope that other jurisdictions do same so we can have a greater impact. If it's just Clackamas County alone out of 36 counties, that's not a strong message to the state. Might be a message to our voters and the citizens in this county, but as far as having an impact, if all 36 counties joined in, hypothetically, probably won't happen, but because can you imagine the impacts? And I think that maybe whether it's a September election, November election, if it's a November election, that gets more opportunity for other jurisdictions to consider joining in with something, as opposed to trying to rush the timetable and putting them in a spot. But I would like to see other jurisdictions participate.
Okay, well, this is a Clackamas County vote. We do not bind any other counties to do that. I think, to your question, getting other counties involved in it, I think we're in a position maybe to lead on this issue. I don't know what other counties are considering this. They may be having a discussion right now and we don't know about it. But if we came out and led on this, I think it's important that we're the leaders on this. And like I say, we can't bind other counties. So if we wait till November, which I think is probably the way to go, I know of at least 2 other ballot measures, countywide ballot measures that are coming up. And so that would take our cost from $300,000 to $100,000.
And there's other jurisdictions as well, most likely, that would have them
Jurisdictions
on the
involved,
ballot.
I understand that. And I think we're going to be loaded up, commissioners, on ballot measures. So I think the $300,000 is going to be pretty much dispersed throughout in the county in various forms. Because we have a lot of special districts, I think, wanting to add tax increases. There's a couple fire, there could be some schools that I know of, so I think it's going to be quite a bit less than that. But I also think the people who are listening out there saying to do something about drugs, they would consider it, yeah, that's our tax money, let's start doing something about it. Why do we pay you? We don't pay you to necessarily try not to correct a wrong. We pay you to go out and do the good fight on this. So that's my opinion on it. we've also are expending some other resources on areas to fight tolling. And that's almost universal. People don't like tolling, and yeah, they expect us to do that, and we are expending resources on that as well. So I kind of look at it that way. We have two commissioners in the queue who would like to go first. Mr. Scholl?
Happy to. Measure 110 is a blight on our society, it needs to go away. Your options, let me ask a question. Option number one, should the Oregon legislature repeal Measure 110 to reinstate all previous provisions? What does all previous provisions mean?
Sure. When Measure 110 was passed, it attached versions of the statutes involved and showed where there would be changes. And so essentially, if that's something that you chose to do, we would do the same thing. We would attach the copies of that statute that was involved in of the numerous statutes involved in Measure 110 and show where it would change back to the older language.
And in the SEL 805, the 175-word description that you can write, would that be adequately
It would be, to
called
summarize,
out and explained?
yes, as they did in Measure 110, yes.
Okay. So what you're looking for today is approval on the leading question for the ballot measure, right?
I think, not necessarily today, of course, but I think that's exactly where this would go, is that 20-word question is really the centerpiece of what would need to be the advisory, the focus of the advisory vote. There's a 10-word caption we prepare, and then there's that 175-word summary. But if the 20-word question is something that, we can work on after getting your feedback and what the policy issues are that you're trying to address, and then put those drafts together as we subsequently address this issue.
So when we're done with the SEL 805, it's going to send a clear picture to the people of Clackamas County that the intent of this is to repeal Measure 110, return back to pre-Measure 110, and restore our ability in this county to uphold law and order?
If that's the
Would
question
that be the
that
picture the typical resident would get from this?
that would be the intent of filling out the form properly, yes.
Yeah.
That whatever the question is, and if it's repeal, then that's exactly what we would attempt to do. And I think that that's fairly straightforward because you sort of reverse what was done in Measure 110.
Okay, and I think people would understand that. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner West?
First, my question to you guys, I'd also love to hear the perspective from our DA if we get a chance to today.
Continue.
What John would bring to the table too. My question says, should the Oregon legislature repeal 110 to reinstate all previous provisions? It was passed as a measure by the voters statewide. Does the legislature have the authority to overturn, or would they have to do a referral back to the voters to relook at this issue to repeal it? Could they do a joint resolution to refer back to the voters to repeal 110? I don't know if the legislature has the authority to repeal 110 based on it being a ballot initiative. Can you explain
Let him
that?
answer that first.
Sure. The legislature can amend the statutes. So that's essentially what we'd be asking them to do, is just amend these statutes back. So they could do so. They could do so.
Okay. You give us, we have a copy here of Measure 110. Gosh, looking at this, just browsing through this, I could see why voters passed it. But when you look really deeply under the hood, you start to see a lot of really damaging policy positions that have hurt the state. And I think voters have remorse. And here's the problem with the legislature in Clackamas County. They are not listening to us on multiple issues. We were sold that Measure 110 was the Portugal model. Anybody who actually looks at the Portugal model realizes that Measure 110 is nothing like the Portugal model. Portugal never legalized drugs. It only decriminalized them, reducing criminal penalties, but they maintained the prohibition. Drug dealers still go to prison in Portugal, but you can have large amounts of fentanyl in Oregon and not really see any penalties. And it also made sure that they had the infrastructure for those that were addicted to drugs with behavioral issues, that they would have access to actual recovery-oriented systems of care. and they expanded their treatment. We still are begging for those opportunities throughout Oregon as we rank near the bottom in the entire nation. They didn't have that problem in Portugal. People are still arrested and fined for possession of hard drugs like heroin and meth in Portugal. And drug users are sent off to treatment either by inducement or by aggressive punishment or even by coercion by the government of Portugal. So there is accountability there, but in Oregon, we just decriminalized it. British Columbia decided to follow our model and has now decriminalized and will once, I believe, see that beautiful city hollowed out by this type of policy. Alberta, Canada, and Calgary took another approach, and they went in full recovery systems. And where we see policies like this passed, we see bad outcomes. They are clearly measurable. I hope that we can ask other counties like Marion, Polk, Yamhill to partner with us. It is essential because what we're doing is we're stating a new asserted worldview in how we address this. We're already seeing that happen with the resolution. Multiple counties of the resolution we just passed are looking to pass it now and reviewing it. Happy Valley just passed our resolution on a city level. I know 8 other cities looking at it right now because we're tired of it being ignored that we truly have a recovery problem, that he deals with the human need in the state of Oregon. And the mantra and the monolithic statement has always been around housing first, all aspects of harm reduction. And we have not been real honest in our statements about what is happening with drugs and addiction in our community. So I think that this is a worthwhile investment, that the voices of Clackamas County residents can be heard, hopefully along with other jurisdictions, as we create a worldview that informs different actions. And a different action is going in an opposite way of what Measure 110 has done to our local communities. And that's sometimes where we have to be able to use our voice that shows leadership and vision, even if it's not legally binding. So that's why I think it's a worthy investment, where we start to assert a different ideological worldview to inform different local actions.
Okay.
I support this. I like option 1.
Okay. Before we continue with commissioner comments, I'm going to defer from the normal protocol of a policy session. Since we have an elected official in the room, I'm going to ask if District Attorney John Wentworth would like to come forward and make a comment or not. Thank you, John. Would you provide a seat for him, please? Normally, we don't do this, but this is a little bit different. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Commissioners, my name is John Wentworth. I'm the District Attorney of Clackamas County. I don't disagree with much of what Commissioner West just said, but I have one correction. Unfortunately, Oregon's not near the bottom for drug treatment. We're at the bottom. Mississippi and Louisiana are ahead of Oregon. That's how bad it is. In my opinion, when ballot measure 11 was on the ballot, I do believe that the voters were sold a bill of goods. They were told that this was the answer, that treatment would be provided to Oregonians who had drug addiction. I think that's what the voters were voting for, and it hasn't happened. 2 years later, $265 million later, we're still at the bottom. We also rank number 1 in the country for methamphetamine and opioid addiction. So we're number 1 in the country in a bad way for drug addiction, and 50th in the country for treatment options. So until we have that, this was designed to treat drug addiction as a public health issue. I get it. I understand why voters voted for it in that context. But this hasn't been treated as a public health issue over 2 years later. That's the failing of this ballot measure. So I'm not here to advocate for criminalization. I want to be clear. Yeah. You don't want my support on saying it should be criminalized. I think there needs to be an answer for providing that treatment to Oregonians who are addicted. We now see a drug on the streets, fentanyl, that is the most addictive opioid we've ever seen. That's why drugs like Adderall, which college students are using religiously now, fake Adderall's being introduced onto our campuses with fentanyl as a precursor substance in order to have an addictive substance that our college students are using. So it's destroying our community. I'm watching it as a community member. I live in this community. I'm watching it as a professional. And I'm not saying that making it a crime is the answer. I'm just saying if you don't have the treatment options available in the first place, you're never going to have success. And unfortunately, prior to ballot measure 110, the way people were getting treatment was through the criminal justice system. That's where the treatment options were. We've been cut out. Those aren't available anymore. So, okay, so what's the answer? The answer hasn't been presented, and that's why we have the crisis that we see, at least in part. I mean, it's a multi-tiered issue, but until you until you create the treatment options, you're never going to have success.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the district attorney? Commissioner Shaw?
Yeah, my question is, if we don't recriminalize the possession of these drugs and give our police and our sheriff deputies the ability to push back those drugs that, because of Measure 110, have trickled closer throughout our communities, closer to our kids, taking some lives. If we don't recriminalize that in conjunction with a new paradigm of treatment first, those two things combined, compassion, long-term addiction counseling, combined with very strict law enforcement, removing drugs and the use of drugs off our street. In other words, if we don't do those two things at the same time, in my opinion, we're never going to make headway, right? And the other thing, too, Mr. Wentworth, is that how many times have I heard people tell me that they would still be on the street addicted if it wasn't for the fact that they were put in jail and forced to dry out? Many of them saw that as their only hope for getting clean.
So your first question hits the nail right on the head, Commissioner, which is if arrest isn't the answer, what is? And I don't know what the answer is. I can tell you that the numbers right now speak for themselves, which is 4,164 people were cited. 34 people, only 34 people even made the phone call.
Yeah, right here.
Right? So if you don't provide a mechanism by which people have to get treatment, which is the Portugal model.
Yep.
You force people to get treatment that they otherwise wouldn't get, they will not seek it on their own. The numbers that we see after ballot measure 110 prove that. In my profession, I handled dependency cases for a while, cases where the state had to step in and take children from their parents because the parents couldn't parent them. And I've watched parents literally give custody of their children over to the state because their addiction was so severe. And if that's not a motivator to get people off drugs, I don't know what is.
Right.
You have to make people go get treatment. Alcohol's different. It's not fentanyl. Fentanyl is different.
Thank you. Commissioner Shaw. Continue.
Well, yeah, one more part to my question is, if Measure 110 was repealed and we go back to the situation we had in terms of the court's ability to direct somebody into treatment, would we be able to do that again? If we had a facility to send them to?
Yes, I'm not naive enough to believe that's the panacea,
Yeah.
right? We're still going to have people who are addicted.
Yeah.
We're still going to have people who are dealing drugs. My concern is the two largest drug busts Oregon has ever seen have occurred in the last 12 months. If you create demand, which we have, you will get supply. We are seeing half a mile from my house was a major drug bust of fentanyl just 3 weeks ago
Wow.
at my grocery store. So it's in this community. That had never happened before, right? So if you create the demand, and we've created the demand in Oregon, you're going to get the supply, and that's what we're seeing. So it's a multi-tiered approach. You have to have drug interdiction, absolutely, but you have to get people into treatment. And the problem is we don't have the treatment available to get them into in the first place, and we don't have a mechanism to get them into treatment even if we had the treatment available. So there's a lot of work to do. I agree with you, Chair Smith, that it's going to take a long time to undig ourselves out of this hole.
Yes, it is going to take us a long time, but we do need to at least have a start.
We do.
Commissioner West, I believe, has a question for you.
I'm interested in seeing in the last 2-ish years, as we have seen a massive shift in policy, how has that changed the work in your office? And what have you seen in the criminal activity within Clackamas County and the greater Portland area? I know you work closely with Washington and Multnomah County.
We do.
Probably a little closer to Washington County. And then I'm interested, is your number of 4,100, is that a Clackamas County number? Because I've heard that number as high as 16,000. I don't know where the difference is, but where we didn't get people actually like into treatment, but we've had some type of issuance of a ticket or a referral.
I don't know where the 16,000 comes from. The 4,164 was a statewide number. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, most law enforcement officers in Oregon have just
They
given
just don't
up,
do it.
given the citations.
Right.
They just don't do it.
It's not worth the paper it's written on.
It's not worth the paper, it's not worth the risk that is posed to a police officer to write a ticket that is less of a fine than if you drive 1 mile over the speed limit.
Wow.
So that's what the police are up against. So I'm not sure, and I'm sorry, the first part of your question was.
I'm curious about how you've seen
Oh.
the change in criminality within Clackamas County or Washington and Multnomah County, the metro area,
Yep.
with regards to after, I mean, it's a massive policy shift, right, that impacts safety in communities and vibrant communities and whether they're vibrant or not, I feel like. And I want to know the tangible difference since Measure 110 has been passed, as you see it as a law enforcement
Well,
agent.
thank you. We certainly see an increase in property crime. And you've been reading in the paper about shoplifting, organized retail theft. Those are typically crimes that are meant to fund drug addiction. That's what we're fighting against it in our local retail establishments. It's why it's so bad in Portland. You know, you just saw REI shut down in
Right.
Portland.
That's us big, too.
Walmart has pulled out of Portland. I know that stolen car thefts have gone up. I mean, it's a real challenge because these are, we knew that once you take away the ability to interdict in drug use, you take away the ability to deal with the crimes that are going to result from that. And now we're seeing the results of the crime. Those are going up. If you look at the numbers in my office right now, it appears that property crime has gone down, but because in the unit that handles property crime in our office, we also handle drug crimes. So it's deceptive because the numbers seem to have calmed down, but that's because we're not prosecuting drug crimes anymore.
Yeah.
But on a property crime level, they've gone up. The actual property crime, they've gone up, and that's the part that concerns me. We're also seeing a massive increase in the use of firearms and the possession of firearms by criminals. That's what, if you speak to your sheriff's deputies and your sheriff, that's what they'll say, that almost every stop they have involves a firearm now. That didn't used to be true.
Wow. I have another question for you. How much fentanyl can somebody have on their person before it's actually a felony and it goes beyond what Measure 10, like where it kind of tips the scales outside of Measure 10 and you actually prosecute? How much of that drug can they have on them?
I don't believe fentanyl is covered by 110. That would still be a crime, whatever they have.
Okay. So how about meth?
What's that?
How much meth or how much other?
Meth is, I think, can't remember if it's 1 gram or 2. It's quite a bit.
Okay, that's a lot.
That's
Okay.
a lot of methamphetamine.
A lot of meth.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you coming here and adding your perspective to this conversation. It's very important.
Thank you.
I know you have other things to do, but we're going to move forward and try to do something. When it comes to the ballot language we put out there, we're using the term Measure 110. We all know what that is, but I'm not sure that the voters will immediately understand what it is unless we define it. For instance, if we could say something, John, you can help me with this. Should the Oregon legislature repeal Measure 110, the the decriminalization of drugs, comma, to reinstate all previous positions, something like that. I'm just throwing that out there for our legal eagles in the back, wordsmithing this. So we get 20 words, we've used 12 of them by my count, is that correct? Somehow nuance that, so the ballot title explains exactly what Measure 110 is and identify it at the same time, if that makes sense. What do you think?
I think that's how you have to explain it to the voters. I'm in favor, I can't remember which commissioner said this, but I do believe it was confusing to the voters.
Yeah.
Under 110.
Yeah,
It was
I did.
confusing to me, and I knew exactly what it did.
Right?
So the clearer we can make it, and I think talking about either criminalization or decriminalization, folks will resonate with that and understand it better than ballot measure 110 itself.
Are you done?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Chair Smith, I love that comment, but I think I should, since we have words, something about the decriminalization of illicit hard drugs, right? I don't want them to think we're dealing with marijuana here or what are the Adderall or whatever, right? Like, I think we need to point out exactly the key issue here, and it's the legalization of illicit hard drugs. We don't, if we have enough words, we can even say such as fentanyl, meth, and heroin, if we have enough words.
Or maybe we come up with a different word besides hard that's more descriptive, but you know what? I'll get my thesaurus out later for that.
Methamphetamine counts as just as many words as meth.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Methamphetamine, yeah.
Yes. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For joining our conversation. I appreciate it much.
Of course.
And I appreciate your service in this really hard work.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot. Our two attorneys, gentlemen, would you like to return? And Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I'll keep it short. I agree that the language should have some element of defining what 110, the criminalization of drugs, or what our goal is. I do want to say that should it ever be repealed at a statewide level, there's nothing that precludes the legislature from funding some of the treatment mechanisms that are in place as a result of 110, so they continue to do that. But I also argue that if that was the panacea fix and the magnitude of the problem the day 110 passed, the magnitude of the problem today is substantially higher, greater, and it surpasses the amount of money that there's available to fix it. So we made our financial solutions or cures, or not cures, treatment, that has grown greater than the revenues we're ever going to cover it. So we just made our problem worse, frankly. So that's where my passion is driven on this. So I'm okay with just asking staff to take our comments here today and craft something. I think the shorter the words, the better. I like one, but I do also agree with my colleagues with the suggestion of the decriminalization, what 110 did,
Yeah.
right?
Defining
What we're
Measure
trying to
110.
undo.
Yeah, and we've taken notes on what you said today, and we'll come back with a revised version of that first question. It looks like where you're going with this, and for further discussion.
Yep.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
I appreciate everybody that came today who's doing this, and we'll get it scheduled when we can. Gary, what's up next?
Next policy session, I-205 Toll Project, Environmental Assessment Findings, Technical Letter. Staff from Transportation and Development will present. And they are Dan Johnson and Mike Besner and Jamie Stasny.
Welcome. Thank you for coming. On to the next hot topic of the day. Go ahead, please introduce yourself.
They're always so underdressed when we follow the district attorney. I just want to make note of that.
You know, you're
Different
fine.
jobs.
You're just fine.
Different jobs.
Exactly. Chair Smith, Commissioners, we are here again to talk to you about the I-205 environmental analysis and comments. We were here on the 12th last week discussing your letter. On Friday, I believe Friday, on the 14th, yes, correct, I forwarded out some revisions to that letter. I want to just make sure we're clear about that. There were three primary components to those revisions. One was including Commissioner Savas's recommendations for some additional language about vehicle hours traveled, Second, though, we didn't really have a chance to discuss, but I want to make sure we enlightened you about this. We had some legal advice to add some additional language that gives us standing when looking at other jurisdictions technical information, that we can have we can relate and or raise similar concerns around those items. And then basically, last but not least, was a clarification around our position as a participating agency. So the latter two, while they weren't significant in regards to verbiage, they were significant in regards to strategy around the topic. I am aware there's some proposed revisions on there, and we'll finish up, and then we'll kind of come back to that, if that's okay with the chair and the commission. But I wanted to, turn it over right now to our staff. Well, first and foremost, I want to apologize, because on the fly last week, I did a thank you to our amazing team. I left out a couple people, one of which is our traffic safety group with Joe Merrick and the great work that he did, and also our partners over at PGA. They have been, there's been a partnership and a consortium that's come together to kind of provide the technical comments that you're going to review. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jamie Stasny and Mike Bessner to kind of run through the technical memorandum.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Smith, Commissioners, Administrator Schmidt. It's good to see you all again. Mike and I are going to spend some time today providing more detail beyond the high-level summary that I gave you last week. Before we dive in, I want to remind you that while there are many conversations going on in our region regarding tolling, this conversation is specifically about the I-205 toll project environmental assessment. Okay, so I'll begin by sharing some comments and thoughts on the modeling and the process that was used to develop this environmental assessment. We didn't really talk about this last week, and I wanted to make sure and cover it. First, I want to set the record straight that the model that was used for the foundation to create this environmental assessment was not agreed to by us or any of our regional partners. We have significant concerns about the modeling that was used to create this EA. We feel it was insufficient and in some ways inaccurate. A quick example of a flaw with the modeling is that the ODOT model that they created did not have the same area of analysis as the Metro model. They use both when they're generating this EA, but they don't cover the same area. They used the ODOT model, or what they call the DTA model, to look at diversion. And that model doesn't look at trips that are on I-5, which means they didn't consider that any trips that are on I-5 may reroute onto 205 or into our local system if there is a wreck on I-5. That's a big problem. We're concerned that ODOT drew unsubstantiated conclusions from the modeling that misrepresent the conditions that will occur. More broadly, on process, while there was engagement with the cities and the county, there was not a peer review relationship. A good example of this came with the Transportation Technical Report. For projects like the Rose Corridor or Interstate Bridge Replacement Project, they create a TTR, or Transportation Technical Report Review Group, that consists of peers from around the region, so they can all look at it together and try and understand, does this make sense, ask questions, and evolve the process. They didn't do that for this project. Instead, we did receive an advance copy of the TTR as Clackamas County and a couple of our cities. We provided over 12 pages of comments back to them. We had about a 1-hour meeting with their team where they kind of talked through the comments, but we never knew which ones they adopted and addressed and which ones they didn't. So it just wanted to point out, it was pretty clunky, the process for coordination there, and we never received a red line version of the TTR. So when we got this new EA, we had to review it as though we had never seen it, because we didn't know what had changed. That's different than how they're handling Rose Corridor or IBR. So I just want to point that out. Let's get back to your letter. I know that's what you're really interested in today. I wanted to build on the high-level summary that I provided last week. So I want to provide some examples of the shortcomings for in the EA for these specific areas of concern. We're going to start with our most critical concern, which is safety. Safety for our communities. Our primary concern is that diverted traffic from I-205 onto county roadways and our partner city streets will result in unmitigated impacts that aren't disclosed in the EA. The lack of adequate mitigation on our facilities will result in safety impacts to people driving, moving freight, riding bikes, walking, and taking transit on non-highway facilities. I pulled that directly from our technical letter. I wanted you to hear that because I think that is one of the most important sentences that is in that letter. That is our major concern. ODOT's own findings show, and this is on page 22 of our letter if you want to skim back there, that local roads experience over 7 times the amount of fatal and serious injury crashes than the interstate system. That means that the local roads are already 7 times less safe per trip than the interstate. So that's today, that's right now,
Wow.
7 times less safe. Well, ODOT has shared publicly that safety on I-205 will be increased and fewer crashes will occur on 205. They do not share that safety on our local systems will be decreased vastly and that more serious crashes will occur. Borland Road, Stafford Road, Rosemont Road, crash rates are set to more than double. Our impacted streets and roadways do not have adequate capacity, intersection control, or pedestrian or bicycle facilities to address the increases in congestion, the impacts to safety, and the high level of stress that this project would present. A few examples of these impacts are a 50 to 60% traffic increase on Borland Road east of Stafford Road, and on Borland Road between Eck Road and the Fields Bridge, both with insufficient mitigation. Also, a 100% traffic increase on Willamette Falls Drive, with a pedestrian crossing as the only proposed mitigation. Wow. There are many more. Those are just a couple examples. Wow. Another key concern is that there will be increased levels of traffic stress. We talked about this last week. For people who are walking or biking, they're already in situations where they don't have a sufficient bike lane. There are unsafe areas. These additional trips on the local system are going to raise that level of traffic stress and make it even less safe for them. Some examples of this concern really show up when we look at parallel routes to 205 with lots of pedestrians and bicyclists on them, such as Borland Road and Willamette Falls Drive, where traffic is expected to increase. Another really good example is downtown Oregon City. Traffic volumes are going to increase by 50%, including the Arch Bridge. We all know that's already a substandard facility, and many people are trying to use that today to walk or bike across the river. It's the only place where they can cross the river, and it's insufficient. And there are no mitigations proposed for the Arch Bridge.
Just a moment.
So why don't you take their phone and maybe go out in the hallway?
I think it's over the speaker.
Thank you for pausing, Jamie.
Karen's like, it's not me.
We're all looking.
Glad to hear a voicemail.
Yeah. It's the. Okay.
There.
Okay?
We'll just have that one go to voicemail.
Yes. Thank you. All right. So let's move on and talk more specifically about mitigation. We've been talking about this for a long time, but I want to give you some examples. In your letter, you affirm that the proposed mitigations are inadequate and lack commitment. That's because they offer only vague descriptions of the mitigations that they're offering with no information about when they'll be constructed or how they'll be funded. They also assert that there will be some mitigations that will only be a proportionate share, meaning they will only have to pay for a portion of the cost of the mitigation. That means the county or another jurisdiction will have to pay the other portion of that mitigation. There's no information about details about how much each, like the jurisdiction would owe versus how much ODOT would owe. So that's another complicating factor. ODOT is literally offering, in some cases, to place reflective tape on signals as a mitigation. Reflective tape is not going to keep our communities safe. They also said they'll create a monitoring program to keep an eye on what mitigation is needed and when. But there is no information in the EA about what that monitoring program is, how it will work, who will decide when the triggers are hit for more mitigation, or how it will be funded. Your letter also affirms that travel modes will not change. As we know, transit service in Clackamas County is very limited and is not a viable travel option for many. As we've just discussed, the travel conditions for bicyclists and pedestrians will be worse after the tolls are implemented. So why would people shift modes? The short story is that they won't. And this is a problem because ODOT asserts that there will be a reduction in carbon emissions for the region. That claim remains unsubstantiated. If tolling is to be expected to be a tool to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, there must be reasonable mode choices. To achieve congestion management, as identified in the project's purpose, investments in bikeway and transit infrastructure would be necessary as part of the mitigation so that people have reasonable travel alternatives. For example, investments could be made to make a complete protected bikeway path throughout the corridor, including along Stafford and Borland Road, parts of 99E. There also needs to be regular, reliable transit service throughout the corridor, addressing both through and local trips to provide that as a viable mode option. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mike to finish us up.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. The EA also claims economic benefits to the areas that are going to see an increase in diversion traffic. Oregon City downtown, Canby's downtown. They actually conclude that they'll benefit, but there's very little to support that statement. We find it pretty hard to believe. They believe that it'll have the same or improved access to jobs, but the analysis seems flawed on scenario assumptions. And as you said in your letter, we need more analysis. Pre-completion tolling. The plan is to turn the tolls on in late 2024 before the third lane is constructed. Just going to let that sit out there for a moment. Turn the tolls on before the third lane's built and before any mitigation projects are in place, or at least any of substance. They can't be done that quickly. And it wasn't modeled to our satisfaction. It wasn't fully modeled like the rest of this, like the rest of the plan. And the interesting part is this might be the only scenario that even actually ever occurs because, as we all know, there's another tolling process right on its heels called the Regional Mobility Pricing Project, RMPP, that would potentially change all the traffic modeling. So the pre-completion tolling is real. It will occur if they turn the tolls on when they say they will, and if the RMPP still lags behind by a year or two. We believe that the project needs to be revised to eliminate the pre-completion tolling. It hasn't been studied completely, and the impacts will be far worse than the impacts that are stated for with a third lane and tolling. In addition, nighttime tolling, we think also should be stricken from the project. We think from safety concerns in the middle of the night where they're not going to raise a lot of money because less people are using it, the toll will be less. We'd rather people be on the nice, wide, safe, well-lit interstate as opposed to windy and narrower, unlit rural roads. And the pre-completion tolling will simply exacerbate all these impacts that Jamie's already mentioned so far. And we feel they've barely analyzed that portion of it and just said, we'll get through it. But again, none of the mitigation projects will be in place. In addition, the pre-completion tolling will exacerbate the impacts to vulnerable populations, and we don't think that's been analyzed or mitigated. The entire project, we know low-income residents, seniors, and other vulnerable populations will be impacted, and we, again, do not think those impacts have been properly analyzed. And last thing we'll mention here, cumulative impacts. You know, this has been talked about for a while, and the Urban Mobility Office and ODOT has had a plan for this RMPP, which includes I-205 and tolling the rest of I-5 and 205. And they have one plan, but yet they're separating these two and doing 205 separately. This EA does not consider the RMPP at all. It's not part of it. And so the impacts to this don't include any impacts from the future tolling. And as a matter of fact, I actually had a meeting with the RMPP. That EA has begun. It's in its early stages. So these projects are actually even overlapping, yet they're not considering them together. I did ask a question at an RMPP meeting the other day about that, where a cumulative impact, an impact on one and an impact on the other, they're not being added together and they're being considered separately. It will greatly impact the mitigation projects that are proposed. And we think that's a big flaw in this EA as well. So, to summarize, we believe that ODOT needs to conduct a more thorough analysis related to safety, the mitigation, economic, and the other concerns we've outlined here today. This analysis can only be sufficiently accomplished through an environmental impact statement, not an environmental assessment. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Commissioners, I know we all want to comment on this. I'm just looking at what our proposed action is to approve this letter. It's been amended. What about the 41-page report? What do you intend on doing with that?
Well, and we are also asking for your acceptance of that so that we can submit it along with your letter as official comment by the
Yeah, it doesn't
deadline.
say in our options for the motion. That's why I asked. I want to make sure that both of those very important documents are submitted.
That's correct. So the intent of today's exercise was initially to formally have the board approve the 36-page plus
Yep.
technical comments. We've got some minor revisions, so I would propose that we would amend, those are amendments to your letter that are being proposed, that I've vetted with you, and so we would basically ask the board to approve both documents
Yep,
for
yep.
submittal by the 21st.
And look, and my board looks like a Christmas tree.
I can't
Commissioners
imagine.
want to talk, yes, and I have an idea for an amendment in addition too. Commissioner Savas, I think you were up first.
Actually, it's Commissioner West, but I don't care.
Commissioner West, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries.
I'll go first.
All right,
I have written out 5 questions that I have, and I'm gonna work to stay in the scope of this letter and not talk about how much I dislike tolling, because that's not why we're here. But I want to try to stay to this plan. One of you, I think you might have alluded to like a specific argument. My first question actually I wrote down was, what is our strongest argument? I think under 1A. And why do you think that would be our strongest argument is my first question.
Strongest argument for wanting an environmental impact statement?
Yeah, for wanting an EIS, yeah.
Yeah, well, because we believe there's a significant impact.
Okay.
For many, many reasons, but an
Do we have
EA,
one that's better than the other, that's like,
You can
gives us
only-
more teeth?
you can only have an environmental assessment if there is a finding of no significant impact,
Okay.
period. And we don't believe that's the case here. We believe there's many significant impacts that are not being mitigated properly.
And out of that significant impacts, the many, do we have one that's got a little more oomph and is better than the others, that has a little more punch to it? Are they all created equally, I guess, or are they not?
I think they are all created equally to a degree, but I think the fact that they failed to analyze the cumulative effects is one of our biggest concerns. And there are a lot of rules in the federal guidelines about analyzing projects that are reasonable to expect to be occurring in the near future. At the same time, there are rules that you cannot ignore those, which is essentially what they've done with the RMPP. They've set those aside and said, we're just looking at 205 here. So that cumulative effect argument, I think, is probably one of the highest on our radar and one of our largest concerns.
Thank you for that. Given the resistance of our state representatives to allowing the public to be heard, is there any opportunity to get ODOT to conduct the EIS or to have the legislature direct them to conduct? Can the legislature say to ODOT, we want you to do the EIS? Is that an avenue potentially?
I don't think it is, because it's a federal action.
Okay.
And so it would have to come from the Federal Highway Administration.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
just a minute, point of clarification, but yet, in our 36-page report, we asked them to do an EIS, correct? Well, then the legislature can do it.
They might be able to. I don't know. We'll have to research that.
Of course they can.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think they can make the ask. Whether they aren't the decider, I think is what we're trying to
So
say.
I guess there's two ways to look at it. Yes, they can tell them, whatever federal highway says, we want you to put this on pause and do everything that you would do for an EIS. I mean, they could have them do that.
Okay.
Okay, that's my next question. And I think it's important if we put pressure on a county that we start to like point this out regarding the EIS. I want to know who of our state legislators are supporting on getting ODOT to perform this EIS? And can we get this put on the record? I jotted down a number of House and Senate districts that I believe would be directly, should be on the record regarding their position of the EIS. House District 18, 26, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 48, 51, 52, 57 in the House. I believe the senators and their districts that should be put on the record on whether or not they will support an EIS. Senate District 9, 13, 19, 20, 21, 24, 26, and 29. I hope to see a comment, a yes or no support for EIS from every single one of those legislators, and most of those all touch Clackamas County. I'm tired of it being so silent and our representatives not speaking up against this issue. ODOT states tolling can be a reliable funding source. We need to make an ongoing transportation improvements, and it has the benefit of reducing congestion at the same time as it raises revenue. That's their claim. How much cost will be shifted to our county and local governments for our maintenance and improvements is my question.
Well, that's a great question. I definitely don't have a specific answer for you, but there will definitely be a shift. Our roads will see more traffic, which means pavement will wear sooner. We'll have more crashes, which means more responses, more, the sheriff coming out, more of our response, and having to work through that. So it's a very difficult one to answer, but there's a definite cost to it. But part of it is we don't even feel like we have a real good feel for what the impacts even are yet. So it's very hard to put a finger on it.
It sounds a lot like a more monstrous version of an unfunded mandate.
Oh.
Yeah. And my last comment and question with ODOT. ODOT states in the past that we probably would have paid for these transportation projects with the traditional revenue source like the gas tax. Things are different now, as we all know. People are making a switch to electric vehicles. 13% of the new vehicles board, of the newly registered vehicles in December, 13% of them were electric. That's the last month's data. So we are seeing that happen. How much of a reduction in the gas tax are we really seeing is my question. And are there any permanent source of making more funds available, such as eliminating the DEQ vehicle inspections and keeping the inspection fee to help fund transportation costs, since the vast majority of all cars no longer need to go through DEQ and a bunch of them are becoming electric now? So why are we still paying for that expensive cost? So why can't we reallocate those funds to pay for much needed transportation improvement, and can we bond against that money? That's my question. As you know, one of the biggest arguments is the gas tax, and nobody wants to look at alternative funding sources. I don't know if you guys can address maybe that question, and then I will yield back the time to the rest of the board.
Thank you, Commissioner West. Up next, Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, I like your 36-page letter, technical letter. ODOT, in my opinion, over the last couple of years has not been transparent about their intent about tolling. So the question was asked, but let me reword it a little bit. Should ODOT resist our request for them to do an environmental impact study? What pressure could the federal government put on them to do that?
Well, in the end, it's actually a federal government decision.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So
yeah.
it wouldn't be ODOT's decision to make.
No, okay, okay. And finally, should the environmental impact study not be done, we're left hanging where we are now, a few more months closer to the threat of implementation of tolling. Have you considered what the next step might be in terms of a legal you know, the last straw legal action that we might take or originate in this county to push back on tolling?
Well, right now, all we're doing is responding to what's there
Yeah.
and obviously protecting all rights, but we're responding to what's there to make the case that this is not the right way to go. We are singularly focused on that right now. Should they make a different decision, we would all have to talk about what kind of next steps there are.
So to expand on that briefly, essentially the work that you see being done today and the documents that you see being created for our submittal by Friday create standing.
Yeah.
Create standing on these topics. So if and when certain decisions are made, we'll have to come back and re-engage with the board, see what those next steps might be. But the strategy we are taking is to ensure that we have a place in that discussion and we have options to assess. Standing by the sidelines and not commenting, not bringing these topics to light, not referencing certain items as we do in our letter, basically eliminates some of our abilities in the future. So we have everything in the kitchen sink in these documents to give us options going forward.
And finally, we need to deliver this technical letter to ODOT by COB this Friday, the 21st of April. Is that correct? Okay, well, I support your option A.
Thank you.
May I quickly? Just wanted to address the idea of the EIS. Commissioner Schull, you just said if ODOT fails to move forward with the EIS, they have other options. Their intention now is to issue a revised EIS or EA. So basically, take all the comments, go back, address what they can, revise the EA, do more analysis. So there is opportunity for them to do more analysis without doing an EIS. So I just wanted to be really clear about that. We are asking for additional analysis. We feel strongly it can be best accomplished through an EIS, but there are other pathways for them to do more analysis and issue a revised EA.
The thing we're concerned with the revised EA route, which is why we're not recommending it or even suggesting it, is they don't really need to do another public process at all. They can just do whatever it is they're going to do and package it in a revised EA and hand it to everybody and say, here it is.
Okay. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, well, I want to thank our staff for all the hard work they've done, great work. When I first read the EA when it came out about a couple months ago, I was just flabbergasted. I was upset because it seemed that it was so vague. It was almost like a political document of sorts. It sugar-coated a lot of things, basically in a way that really did not clearly articulate what an EA should be, frankly, a lot of that. So I was pretty frustrated. I was going to take a highlighter. I was going to mark it all up, and I had all my different colors of highlighter, and I was just so frustrated. I just said, I'd probably color the whole thing. So I did read the report that our staff and legal team and everyone else did, technical team did, and I was going to take a highlighter and just highlight all the great things that were in there, and I realized I would probably color the entire document. So I want to just say kudos. I mean, I went from flabbergasted to reading the EA to thankful and appreciative, and wow, great work in here. A lot of good points in here. I read it cover to cover. I'm impressed. So everything, I wouldn't change a thing. Everything in here is just spot on. If we missed something, it's because we didn't have enough time, perhaps. But for the most part, I'm very confident that if they just simply try to revise a few things, I don't think it's going to cover it, period. And if they choose just to issue a FONSI, finding of no significant impact, I will be outraged, and I think we should take every legal avenue we can to appeal that, whatever that process may be. I don't know what that looks like, but what's pointed out in this document is really critical, and the safety issues, the oversights, very upsetting, frankly, this whole thing. I could go on and on about all my frustrations, but I've been on this journey a long time. I've been on this journey since they first did this. But I said this before, in 2015 and 16, in my role at JPAC, we were charged with how do we fund all these projects we have in the region, the big ones. How do we do that? And tolling was not on the menu. It is not in the documents. I've gone over all those documents from 2015 and 16. Nothing was in there. We were charged by the legislature in early 2017 as a region, to come up with some major projects we could all agree on, and we did, the 3 bottlenecks. No one told us anything about not funding them. No one told us anything about tolling. We submitted those 3 projects, the 217 bottleneck, the Rose Quarter bottleneck, and I-205. And we all know why we got behind 205, because of tolling, because of diversion. So, lo and behold, they funded all those projects except for ours, and then they instituted a recommendation for tolling going forward. So it's been a bad journey. I have watched the language change. To me, it's a large bait and switch, because we were told, we're only going to toll these certain segments, and then it grew, and it grew. And now it's grown to this monster without justification, without support, without engaging us honestly in either a technical discussion or a political discussion or a public discussion, in an honest way. And this is just essentially being rammed out our throat, let alone what's going on with the state legislature right now with the chair, the acting chair of the Joint Transportation Committee, not wishing to hold a hearing on any of these tolling bills that are out there, which is another injustice. So I can see the writing on the wall. This is being railroaded through. It is what it is. I like your recommendations in the letter. Chair, I'm willing to accept, frankly, the letter as crafted.
I have some changes
Okay.
before you get ahead of yourself.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment. I haven't commented yet, Commissioner Savas.
Sure.
I want the commissioners to turn your attention to the letter that's redlined, and there are some additions in there. And on the front page, in the paragraph that starts with an overview, we come down to, the county also joins in and concurs with substantive comments on the draft EA. I want to take out the words "on the draft EA" and submit instead, and technical reports, because the way this is worded, it sounds like we are concurring with the draft EA, and we're not. So I would just like to take that out and then keep the technical reports in there. And I have a copy here. That's fine. So there's that. There's that change on page 1. On page 2, under 3, paragraph 3, there's a red line statement that says, additionally, because of the diversion routes are longer and will be more congested, vehicular hours traveled would also not be reduced under the current proposal. That's also accepted language. And on the very third page, the very last paragraph, it says, as a federal lead agency, as a participating agency. We are a participating agency. We are not a federal lead agency. So if we could make that as well. And my statement that I want to make on this before I accept the motion is, I believe that Clackamas County is being singled out unfairly as the first jurisdiction to be told, and we must stand in opposition to one of the largest potentially unequitable tax increases in Oregon history. And I told the story of a toll in California that started at 25 cents in 1964. And in January of 2021, the California legislature raised that toll to $7. One way, one time. So if you think for a minute that the toll is only going to be a couple dollars, just wait until the system really starts running well and people have become accustomed to paying for a $2 toll. Oh, okay, it's like the frog being in the pot of water, and you slowly turn up the heat and you get accustomed to the heat as it increases until pretty soon the temperature is boiling and the frog dies. They're not going to be satisfied until the frog dies. Not fighting this tolling plan is not an option for us. It's going to say. So I will accept a motion at this time.
Chair, I don't understand your edits, so could you go back?
Right here.
Yeah, so it doesn't read very well. So what you have crossed out in blue is what you want to eliminate?
Well, yeah, see, on the draft EA, just take out those 4 words.
Okay, well, it doesn't read right if I do that.
Yes, it does.
Sure, it says the county also joins in and concurs with substantive comments.
And the technical reports.
Okay.
And the technical reports submitted by other, and that stays
What
the
was,
same.
what was the next amendment, please?
Well, I don't know, I thought you submitted them, Commissioner.
No, these aren't mine.
Okay, where did these edits come from? Staff? Thank you, Jamie. Well, right there on the second page, it's in red.
Yeah, so you're okay with that?
Yes.
As is?
I like it.
Okay, all right.
And then on page 3, participating agency.
So could staff, are you okay with that? I mean, I was under, we are a participating agency, but don't we have a federal designation?
I think as a participating agency. Correct.
I think I want to say we're a participating agency. I don't want confusion. And you pointed that out.
Okay, so staff's okay with the changes?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, as long as they make technical sense, what I'm after.
Staff came up with the changes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Well, I know that you said the red, but I wasn't sure about the blue, so.
thank you.
All right.
So if that's okay,
Okay.
I will accept a motion that we accept both this letter, the 36-page report to be submitted to ODOT.
I move to accept the technical report as is and the letter with the amendments discussed and made here today.
I'll second.
Commissioner Savas has made the motion. We accept both these documents as edited and submit them to ODOT. Commissioner West has seconded the motion. Any further discussions?
Yes, Chair, just one thing, who we address this to and how it's signed. I just wondered if we wanted to
We're all
all
gonna sign
join
it.
in on a signature. I'm happy to have mine done electronically. I don't need to do a wet one.
Right.
That's one thing. I also want to make sure that we CC Metro, CC the MPO, which is a unique agency of in of itself, and CC all of our participating cities in the region with that. And who am I leaving out?
Can we CC all of those legislative offices and districts I mentioned?
Why not?
Yep,
Why not?
I think that's a good idea.
And I want to know what their position is too. I want to follow up.
Good idea.
Okay.
I think that's part of the motion. Is that understandable, folks? Gary? Dan?
Yes.
Great, page of CCs, I'm good.
Okay. And the letter signed by commissioners, however, Commissioner Schrader is not absent here to vote on it, so her signature, I assume, would not be on the letter?
Actually, before she left, you recall that she reviewed the technical comments, she was fine, and she would happy to add her signature to whatever you
However,
decided.
she's not here to vote on it, Gary.
Correct, but she's off, okay.
So if you're not here, you know you're not here.
Got it.
Really quick, can I intervene? She's a valuable ally politically on this, and she's been very consistent. Even though she's not here, I know I'd like to see her signature. Maybe, I don't know if we're assuming too much, but she's a good ally on this for us.
She is a good ally on this, but commissioners, we are developing a pattern where non-participation and non-work is rewarded. And I kind of don't like that. So I think, the world is run by those who show up.
Chair.
And I might add that we have made some modifications to the letter today, which Commissioner Schrader is not privy to, so that adding her signature might not be a good idea.
I think I understand what Commissioner West is saying, and if I am correctly, I think I agree, if I understand him correctly, but I want to add on, I think politically, knowing we have a partisan state legislature, I think it'd be an error not to include her signature, especially if she desires to have her signature on here. She has been part of this journey as well. I would be pretty upset if I got sick today and I wasn't here and I wouldn't be able to sign this document, as much work as I put into it. So,
Yes, but you've been the lead on this. That's different than Commissioner Schrader. Okay, commissioners, if you want her on, you want her on, that's fine. I hope that in the future, you would allow me to do the same.
of course,
Absolutely.
as long as you're willing.
Shannon, take the poll.
Aye.
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 Aye, my motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Any further comments today?
Get it submitted.
Gary, any further comments?
That is it for today.
Seeing no further business before this Board of County Commissioners, we are adjourned.